This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
The views and opinions shared on this program are that of Louie Tee and In the Lab Room alone and should be taken exactly as they are given. If you are soft, easily offended, or can't listen to the criticism of your team, this program is not intended for you. This is pure, unadulterated football talk for the hardcore fan. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this program. 2014 NFL Lab Reports. Today we're talking about a powerhouse. We're talking about the AFC West champion, Denver Broncos. Look out, that stampede is coming. And it's time to go out to the Mile High City and check in on the Denver Broncos. It's the 2014 NFL Lab Report of the Denver Broncos. Where to begin with this Denver Broncos team? When you talk about strengths. Let's start with Matt PRATER. Of all things, we start with the kicker. Matt PRATER is definitely a strength of this football team. He led the league in field goal percentage a season ago, knocking them home at a 96% clip. And he didn't attempt a lot of field goals, and you generally don't when you're on a team that's as offensively gifted and a powerhouse like the Denver Broncos. They get in the end zone. They don't settle for field goals that often. So PRATER didn't have, the 38 makes or the 41 attempts that, say, a Justin Tucker had, or, say, another field goal kicker like Steven Gostkowski had for the Patriots. He didn't have all the attempts or makes. But the opportunities that he did get, he made the most of them. Only missed one field goal on the entire season, was 25 of 26. And he knocked home an NFL record 64-yard field goal. Now, of course, a lot of that has to do with the thin air up at Mile High. Does not matter. He still has been a force for the Denver Broncos. And when you're knocking home NFL record kicks, don't care where it is, you're the man. And so Matt PRATER is definitely a strength for this Denver Broncos team. We'll talk about Matt PRATER a little bit later on, and you know exactly why. But he's a strength nonetheless for this Denver Broncos football team. You move on to the granddaddy of them all, the biggest strength. And I'm not, normally I list off all the superlatives, and I'm not doing that with this Denver Broncos offense, okay? We're not doing that today. I would be here all day. I always tell you, grab a Snickers. You got a Snickers, it's going to be a while. No, we're not doing that today, because you would be with rotten teeth if I sat here and tried to read off all of the things that made this Denver Broncos offense such a potent machine a season ago, setting all types of NFL records. We're not getting into all of that. Just know that the most important stat of them all is this team averaged 38 points per game. To be exact, 37.9. Go ahead and round that up to 38. That is a staggering number. Nobody else was even close. Nobody else even averaged 30 on the season. Nobody. They almost averaged 40 points a game. What they were doing to teams at the beginning of last season, that's illegal in not only 27 of the 50 United States. That's actually illegal in about 4 continents. So what they did offensively was out of this world. okay? Out of bounds. They were out of bounds on offense last year. 55 touchdowns, passing, only 10 interceptions, passer rating of 114. Need I say more? I'm not going in. 68% complete. Okay, we're done. This offense was like first in every single category imaginable. Peyton Manning was only sacked 20 times. That was a league best. I'm done. This offense was definitely a strength of this Denver Broncos football team. They were the strength of the league until they ran into the juggernaut known as the Seattle Seahawks. But that's another story for another day. Why bring up old stuff? Why you gotta bring up old stuff, huh? I'm just saying. You know, don't kill the messenger. So we move on to the weaknesses for this Denver Broncos football team. As good as they were on the offensive side of the football, there still were some deficiencies. Believe it or not, on this football team. For as good as the Denver Broncos were passing the football, they were not equally as bad at stopping the pass, but they weren't that far behind. This Denver Broncos team needs to improve on their pass defense, and that's why they went out and made some of the moves that they made in the offseason, and we'll talk about those at some point during this program. But nonetheless, this was a Denver Broncos team that was one of 6 teams last season to surrender over 4,000 yards passing on the season. They gave up the 5th most passing touchdowns. You know what I'm about to say. I'm going to say it anyway. Knowledge is power, and I'm just passing it on. So a wise man once told me that points in the National Football League, they come through the passing game. And the Broncos gave up the 5th most passing touchdowns in the National Football League. And so when you put all of those different stats together, giving up over 4,000 yards passing, they were one of 6 teams to do that. You give up the 5th most touchdowns in the league. You give up the 5th most chunk plays, and those are the plays up over 20 yards with 61 of those. It's a recipe for disaster, okay? And this Denver Broncos passing defense was one of the worst a season ago. They've got to clean that up. Again, just because Peyton Manning and the offense is scoring 38 points per game and they're lighting up the scoreboard and they got it on tilt, just because they're scoring an infinite amount of points doesn't mean you can go out and give up as many points as you like because the offense got us. You know, I feel like this Denver Broncos defense last year was like a charge card. And the offense was a black card. And they just went and the defense was just swiping the card. The offense got it. Don't worry about it, man. You ain't going to pick that up. Nah, just put it on the tab. And they were just swiping the card. The offense will pick it up. Don't worry about it, man. They got it. Damn, you going to order that too? You already had all that stuff to eat. Don't worry about it. The offense got it, man. Just put it on their tab, man. Stop talking. They got it. Damn, man, it's your 5th drink, man. I think you need to chill. Shut up, man. The offense got this, man. Don't worry about it. Just put it on the tab. And at some point, you got to stand up as a defense and say, enough's enough, man. We can't be relying on the offense. We got to take care of business. And it finally caught up to them in the Super Bowl. That's why they got 48 put on a skull. Because the offense didn't stand up. For the first time, they swiped the card, did the defense. And it came back and it said, declined, declined. They're like, wait, what? Decline? Let me swipe that again. Swipe it again. Try it again. And they tried it again. I'm sorry, sir. Your card isn't working. It said decline. Insufficient funds. What? Try it one more time. And at the Super Bowl, that black card finally ran out. And the defense had to stand up. And they had to reach in their pocket. And what they ended up coming up with was lint. They didn't have any cash. They couldn't pay for it themselves. You got to stand up and pay for your own. You got to pay your own way this year if you're the Broncos defense. That pass defense has to be better. You look at another weakness for this Denver Broncos team, and it's offensive penalties. For all of the good this Denver Broncos team did on the offensive side of football, and they did a lot well, as we've already chronicled, they still had a lot of penalties on the offensive side of football. Way too many for my liking. Way too many for an offense that was as explosive as now granted, the more plays you have on the field, the more likely it is you're going to have an opportunity to have mistakes. The Broncos were far and away the team with the most offensive plays from scrimmage, over 606 to be exact, plays from scrimmage. Meanwhile, the next closest team was the New Orleans Saints with 400 and some change. So that just gives you some perspective as to how many plays the Denver Broncos ran last season. And the more plays you run, the more likely it is you're going to have penalties. Well, they had 117. Just because you run 606 plays doesn't mean you get to have 117 penalties, but they did. And that netted them 1,000 penalty yards. That's way too many of both. If you were the Denver Broncos, look, I know you scored all those points and you set all these records, but you need to scale that number back a bit and be more proficient on the offensive side of the football. That was definitely a weakness of this team. How about squeezing the peel? That's something that this Denver Broncos team failed to do a season ago. They led the league with 16 fumbles last season. And for as good as this offense was, this team was a 0 in the turnover differential. They broke even. And there was no excuse for that. And this is the reason right here why they broke even. 16 fumbles on the offensive side of the football. You have got to squeeze the football. You cannot be as loose as the Denver Broncos were with the football. These backs put it on the ground. They had fumbles on special teams. Peyton Manning put it on the ground a few times. So that's something that they need to strive to be better at in 2014. And moving forward, you cannot fumble the football. Denver Broncos did it the most last season. That is definitely a weakness that they must clean up. So we move on from the weaknesses of this Broncos football team to, of course, camp battles in the Mile High City. Behind me, I have the services of my big board. And as you can see, camp battles are listed here. Experiment on this side. I'll be using the big board to break down both of these. I'll start with the camp battles in Denver, and there's not a lot of battles per se on this football team as much as it is decisions that have to be made. This is a veteran football team that is basically pushing all the chips to the center of the table. So you don't want to make any mistakes on this roster. You want to keep the right guys. You want to make sure you have depth in all the proper areas. Just in case an injury or two were to occur, you have guys that can step in and you don't miss a beat, because you can't afford to have glaring holes and weaknesses on this football team if you're trying to win it all. So you look at the wide receiver position, and we all know how great this position was a season ago for the Denver Broncos. No more ED, Eric Decker. And so you look at this group: Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Wes Welker, Cody Latimer, Andre Caldwell, and Jordan Norwood. Now, we know Demaryius Thomas, he's the stud of this group. He's the leader. He's the catalyst. He's the guy that's going to set the tone for this entire group. Emmanuel Sanders is a kid that you went out and got from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think he's an upgrade, believe it or not, over Eric Decker. He's a kid that has a lot of potential in this league, and I think if Wes Welker is a guy that can't stay healthy, and we'll talk about Wes here in a second, I could see Emmanuel Sanders going into the slot. And you want Cody Latimer to learn. I don't expect a lot out of Cody Latimer in his rookie season. I don't. But say in 2 years, if this nucleus is still together with Thomas, Sanders, and Latimer, and Wes Welker decides to hang it up, had too many concussions, can't play anymore, I could see Thomas and Latimer being on the edges and having Emmanuel Sanders work the slot, and this being a dynamic offense. Now, again, is Peyton Manning going to be around to see that through? I doubt it seriously, but nonetheless, Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a big part of this offense in 2014. Wes Welker, let's talk about this. He had a concussion against the Houston Texans in week 3 of the preseason, and this is becoming a theme with Wes Welker, and it's happening all too often. And at some point, and Derek Mason, you know, ex-Tennessee Titan, ex-Baltimore Raven, sent out a tweet. And I'm not a big, social media guy. I'm trying to, kind of get up there a little bit more. But he basically said in a tweet to Wes Welker that, hey, man, you got to really start thinking about your future and thinking about hanging it up, man. And he's right. As much as I would love to see Wes Welker continue to play football, at some point you got to say to yourself, is me playing and continuing my career worth the damage that I'm doing to my body and my well-being, 15 years down the line? I mean, because the amount of concussions that Wes Welker has had throughout his career, just in the last 3 years alone, scares me to the point where we could be hearing about Wes Welker, with severe brain damage and memory loss at the age of 45. We could hear about Wes Welker in a deep, dark depression, contemplating suicide at 50. I mean, that's the type of damage he's doing to his brain right now. And you've got to wonder, at what point will he either realize or have a doctor tell him, look, man, you can't play anymore. Dude, you got to hang up your cleats. I mean, this has gone on long enough. You're doing irreparable damage to your brain. And at some point, you're going to pay for this. And you need to stop and quit while you're ahead. So I don't know if he'll reach that point. I don't know if this is the concussion that sends him over the top or not. But he had another one. And so don't know when we're going to see him. Remember, last year he had a concussion, and I think he missed about 3 weeks. And the Broncos struggled when he was out of the lineup. So that could be a huge injury with huge implications attached to it. Cody Latimer, young kid you drafted in the 3rd round out of Indiana, that is a guy that you're going to work with, and you hope that he'll be a Eric Decker replacement in terms of his size. Eric Decker was a 6'3" receiver with big play capability because of his size. He could go up, high point the football, be a physical receiver. You're hoping Cody Latimer can do the same with his frame down the line. Bubba Caldwell is a mainstay on this football team, a guy that Peyton Manning trusts, of course, special teamer. He's not going anywhere. And Jordan Norwood seemed to be a shoo-in to make this roster. And then just a week ago in practice, he tears his ACL. So he is no longer in the mix in Denver. And so now it's a situation where with Norwood out of the picture, Welker going to be out for the foreseeable future, you're probably going to have to hit the streets to find a receiver that can come in and help you in the meantime until Wes Welker is back. So that's a situation and a position worth keeping an eye on out in Denver. So you move on to the offensive line, and talked about this offensive line being among the best in the league. Peyton Manning only being sacked 20 times last year, only being hit 54 times. A tremendous job by this offensive line, and they opened up holes in the running game. The passing game had a lot to do with it, but again, offensive line did their job last year, and now you're getting one of the best tackles in the game back in Ryan Clady. This group is strong, and so you could keep up to 10. The Broncos in the past 2 or 3 years have kept 9 offensive linemen. Looks like they could actually keep 10 this year. The bottom of this group, let's go down this list quickly. Ryan Clady, Orlando Franklin, Manny Ramirez, Luis Vasquez, Chris Clark, Will Montgomery, Michael Schofield, Vincent Painter, Ben Garland, and Paul Kornick are your offensive linemen on this team looking to make this roster. Now, really, the first 8 guys that I mentioned, all the way from Clady to Painter, are going to be on this football team. It's the last 2 that are in question, Ben Garland and Paul Kornick. Now, Kornick has actually been the backup tackle to Ryan Clady. If that holds up, he's on this roster. You've got to believe that the backup tackle is on this roster. So then it's a situation where you look at Ben Garland, and he's played well enough to make this roster as well throughout camp and in the preseason. Will the Broncos say, you know what, we've got some really good depth here, and we need to keep these guys on this roster and stick with 10? Or will they say, hey, we got to trim some fat, got a couple of positions we're a little worried about, we're only going to be able to keep 9? I think if they're only keeping 9, Garland is the odd man out. Go to the defensive line. DeMarcus Ware, Terrence Knighting, Sylvester Williams, Malik Jackson, Derek Wolfe, Kevin Vickerson, Quanterra Smith, Marvin Austin, and Mitch Unrein. That is 9 defensive linemen. Broncos normally only keep 8. And this is the hot button topic in Denver right now. And this is the name that keeps coming up in league circles. The Broncos are up against the cap very tightly. All the moves they made in the offseason, we'll talk about those down the line. But this is the name that keeps coming up. Kevin Vickerson is a veteran that I'm hearing could potentially get cut. And he's a guy that I thought was a really solid contributor a season ago along this defensive line. But all of a sudden now I'm hearing rumblings and grumblings that to free up a little bit of cap space so that they can make some moves when the rest of these guys get released off of the roster and the rest of the league is releasing their players, the Broncos might need to pick up a few players, and a guy like Vickerson might be someone that is expendable and isn't in this group. Because again, Broncos for the last 3 years or so have kept 8. They have 9 right now. Vickerson could be the odd man out, believe it or not. And I feel like he was a key contributor a season ago. So that's interesting. That's something to keep an eye on as well. Again, that may not happen. There may be no validity to that whatsoever. Or that could be essentially the calm before the storm, and he could not be on this football team. You move on to the safety position. TJ Ward, Raheem Moore, Quentin Carter, David Bruton, and Duke Iheanacho. This is a group where TJ Ward, Moore, Carter, and Bruton all look like guys that are going to make this roster. Duke Iheanacho, though, who I feel like is a hard-hitting safety, runs around, makes plays, he's been getting a lot of snaps and a lot of time in camp in the preseason as well. Broncos right now are slated to keep 4. That's what it seems to be most realistically to be. 4 safeties right now, but if Duke Iheanacho is getting the amount of snaps and the time that he's getting, I just don't see the Broncos saying, hey, we're investing all of this time and energy to get you on the field only so that we can cut you. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't see them keeping 4. I see them keeping 5. I keep hearing that they're keeping 4, but I'm not buying it. I just see Duke Iheanacho making this roster. And I actually like him as a football player. So we'll see what they decide to do there, because that group has the makings of a really solid back half if guys stay relatively healthy. And then you go on to the last, and this isn't a camp battle, it's just an honorable mention. Matt Prater, your kicker, I talked about him being a strength. Well, he's going to miss the first 4 games of the season. He has been suspended. And he's got some issues off the field, and he's got to address those and take care of the personal side of things and come back a better person. And hopefully he'll be the same player that he's been for you over the life of his career. But that's a situation worth keeping an eye on. You've got to go out and get a field goal kicker now. And are you going to be able to find it? Look, kickers come a dime a dozen. That's no secret. But the good kickers don't. That's why there is always a constant cycle of kickers out there, because it's hard to find a guy that you trust consistently. And you've got that in Matt Prater. Now you got to hit the streets and recycle one of these bums. Good luck. You got some toughies starting out the season. You got Seattle in week 3. You got Indy in week 1. You've got some tough matchups. Kansas City. You got some tough games to start the season off. This is not the time for Matt Prater to be suspended. And so you better hope none of these games comes down to a late game situation where you got to kick a field goal, because you're going to have a bum out there. So you better pray that your offense and your defense take care of business, and you're not in a situation where you got to try to bang home a field goal from 49 or 51 to win a game, because I don't know who that guy is going to be, and I don't know if you're going to trust that guy. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So you move on to the experiment, and this one is simply titled Last Rodeo. So I feel like this is a last rodeo of sorts. Not necessarily the last year, even if he wins the Super Bowl. I don't know if Peyton Manning wants to hang up the cleats or not. I'm saying it more because I feel like the Denver Broncos are mortgaging the future to win now. And it's the right thing to do. When you can get a Super Bowl title, you gotta do everything you can to get it. I mean, the Ravens did the same thing. They mortgaged the future, And I said they were selling their souls to the devil, which they did. The Grim Reaper came and collected. And last year, the Ravens didn't make the postseason, and they struggled. And so I feel like the Denver Broncos are doing the same thing now. The thing that the Ravens had in their corner when they mortgaged the future and sold their souls to the devil was that they had a quarterback that they knew was going to be around for the next 10, 12 years. In Denver, that's not the case. You're mortgaging the future because you know there is no future. There's right now. And when Peyton Manning hangs it up and you're left with Brock Osweiler, you're going to go immediately from the best team in your division to one of the worst teams in your division. Right off the bat. And so it's okay to do that, though, if you get the return that you're looking for, which is a Super Bowl title. If you get the ring, that will last you for the next decade when you're not as good of a football team. If you don't, if you mortgage the future, if you push all your chips to the center of the table and say, hey, I'm all in, and you double down, and you don't get the ring, and you're bad for the next 10 years, then it's going to sting. Double time. So that's why this is the last rodeo. I feel like the Broncos, with all the moves, and we'll talk about it a little bit more here in this experiment, but they made a lot of moves in this offseason that smells of desperation and, hey, let's get it done. Not now, right now. Research question. After the disappointment of Super Bowl 48, can the Denver Broncos, with all of their new shiny toys, push all the chips to the center of the table and win it all? Self-explanatory. I just went over that scenario. Don't need to do it again. So we move on to the hypothesis. If Peyton Manning is, well, Peyton Manning, and this revamped defense is much improved, then the Denver Broncos can get back to the Super Bowl and this time win. There's a lot of changes in Denver right now. This defense has been overhauled, and for good reason. I talked about the struggles of this defense last season, and if Peyton Manning is healthy and he's out doing what Peyton Manning does, this team is going to be one of the best teams in the league once again. So this schedule is a lot tougher than it was a season ago. However, we'll talk about that later on in the process. But we move on to the materials needed for the Denver Broncos to get back to the AFC Championship game and potentially beyond. Money Mang. You ever heard of Money Mayweather? Money May? Well, this is Money Mang. Money Manning. Money Mang. They need Peyton Manning to be money. I don't understand why you would feel he's not going to be money. Last year, in what was last year? His 15th, 16th season in the league? Whatever. He got in the league in 98. So let's do some math. Last year was year 15 in the league. He threw for 55 touchdowns, an NFL record last season. This guy is like a vintage bottle of 1967 Chateau de Briand. He just gets better with time, man. I don't get it. I don't get it. How is it that he's able to do what he is able to do at this stage of his career? Maybe the whispers were right. Maybe it just gets better with time. Maybe that's what it is. I just don't know. I don't try to sit down and figure out things that defy laws of gravity or the laws of physics. And Peyton Manning defies the laws of physics. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to rack my brain to try to figure out why he is as good as he is at this point of his career. That being said, the Denver Broncos need Money Mang. And not just in the regular season, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but they need him in the postseason. They need him when the stage is its biggest, when the lights are their brightest. They need Money Mang to show up, man. So, we're going to see what this Denver Broncos team is made of this year. Because this is a team, but everything that happens, we're going to put it center stage, right on the shoulders of number 18, every single time. Having a ball. You need Monte Ball to step up this season. I think we And when I say we, I'm talking about fans, I'm talking about the media, I'm talking about everyone around the National Football League. Everyone except the Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning. I think we undervalued the running game last year and the effect. You know what? Let me take myself out of the equation, because I gave respect where respect and credit was due to No Sean Moreno last year. I called No Sean Moreno No Sean Moraine slow, because he was slow, he was robotic, he wasn't the guy that everyone thought he was going to be out of Georgia, and I was disappointed. And so I used to call him No Sean Moraine slow. And last year, he looked anything but. He caught the football effectively. He pass blocked his tail off. And the boy ran the peel last year like his hair was on fire. Jumping over defenders, breaking through tackles. Every single yard that was there, he got it +1. So I don't want you to discount what he did for this Denver Broncos offense last year. He was magnificent last year. He's gone now. He's in Miami. He parlayed that into a contract, and I think it's only a 1-year deal with Miami. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he had to try to get his. I don't blame him. Now, and you didn't want him back. You say, hey, we got a young fella here that we drafted that's ready to take over anyway. Peace. Deuces. So now it's time for Montee Ball to step up. I think he had his appendix removed or something in appendectomy in camp, and he missed some time. I don't know what the situation is. All I know is that this running game is going to rely heavily on the production of Montee Ball. He's got to step up and have a ball. Orange Crush. Orange Crush. I'm talking to the defense. Step up. Step up. This Denver Broncos front office, they sold out. They don't have no more money left. You know why? They spent it all on the defense. They sold out to make this unit better, to make this unit somewhat mirror what the offense is doing. And what the offense did last year, again, illegal in 4 continents. I don't think the defense can match what the offense is doing. They just want them to rival it. Just come close. So they went out and got Aqib Talib. They went out and got TJ Ward. They went out and got DeMarcus Ware. They're getting Von Miller back. This is a different defense. Now they got to play like it. Got to be Orange Crush. Get out. You didn't do a bad job of getting after the quarterback. You had 41 sacks last year. That's not bad, especially with missing Von Miller for the majority of the year. Guy stepped up. Sean Phillips stepped up for you last year. He's no longer here. Von Miller needs to come back and be the guy that he was before the injuries, before the suspensions. You need that guy back. DeMarcus Ware, I swear he still got something left in the tank. I know he does. I think the Dallas Cowboys made a monumental mistake. Their loss, your gain. This defense, they need to be better. Orange Crush. Tank on E. Tank on E. If you're the Denver Broncos, when this season's over with, Tank's got to be on empty, on E. And when you get to the Super Bowl, that's when the light's going to come on. That's when that quarter of a tank light's going to come on to warn you, hey, you really should fill up. But there should be nothing left in the tank when this season's over. Because, again, I don't know how much of a window you've got with Peyton Manning. I don't know how many years he has left in that right arm of his. I don't know how long that neck is going to hold up. I don't know how much longer Peyton Manning is going to want to deal with the rigors of training camp and meetings and having to deal with the daily grind of the National Football League. It takes a toll on you mentally, physically. It exhausts you. How much longer is he going to want to do this? And anybody that has ever played in the league will tell you, I'll show up and play on Sundays. I remember when I used to play in high school, I hated practice. I couldn't stand practice. Hated film session. I didn't want to deal with any of that. But when it came time to play on Fridays, I wanted to play. But it don't work like that. You don't get to ignore all of the preparation and get to reap all the benefits of playing on Friday, or in their case, Sundays. So how much longer is Peyton Manning going to want to endure the rigors of the task of doing all the mental preparation during the course of the week, the training camps, and being away from your family, and having to put in all of the time that it takes to be as great as he is. All the practices with the players after practice is over with, throwing to receivers and getting the timing down. How much longer is he going to want to do that? How much longer is his body going to be able to hold up and do that? You don't have the answer to that. So basically what you have to do is leave it all out on the field this season. Win this year. This is your best opportunity right here. Win. The Broncos don't have any money left. They probably going to have to get rid of some guys next year that they want to keep because the money is running out. That tends to happen when you put all these veterans, you put all these guys in the pot and say, hey, we going in for the gusto right now. So at the end of the season, I need to look at every single one of these Bronco players and say, your tank's on E, your tank's on E. I can't look at one of these guys and say, hey, you still got a quarter of a tank left, man. What you doing? Every single guy on that roster, they need to be spent. And at the end of the day, if they can say that, then you can feel good about what you put forth as far as effort is concerned on the field. And whether it results in you hoisting the Lombardi or not, I can't say. But at least you know I gave it everything I had, because it didn't seem like you gave it everything you had in that Super Bowl. So, tank on E. And a lot of these veterans that you went out and got, you know, TJ Ward is a young veteran. DeMarcus Ware is a aging veteran. Aqib Talib, he's no longer a spring chicken, but they still got a lot of football left. Everybody's tank needs to be on E at the end of this season. Regular season is for chumps. That's right. The regular season is for chumps. When you're Tom Brady, when you're Peyton Manning, if you're Ben Roethlisberger, you're Eli Manning, all these quarterbacks with multiple Super Bowls, and I actually need to take Peyton Manning out of that discussion because he's only got one. Better than zero. But nonetheless, when you're a quarterback that's already tasted success, go ahead and throw Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees in there as well. When you light the league up every year and we stop being amazed at what you do on a week in, week out basis because you do it so well and so often that we've become accustomed to it. We've become spoiled. When you're an elite level quarterback in this league, the regular season is for chumps. You could care less about all the accolades, winning the MVP and tossing for over 5,000 yards. All of that is great because it helps your team win. But if you don't get it done in the postseason, nobody cares. Nobody says, hey, Peyton Manning, 55 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. NFL records across the board. Nobody's going to remember that in 2013. You know what they're going to remember? 48-8 in the Super Bowl. That's what we're going to remember. Nobody remembers second place. We only remember first place. These aren't 7-year-olds. These aren't 5-year-olds. You don't get a juice box and a bag of chips and a gold medal around your neck for participating. Nobody gets rewarded for just showing up and playing and having a good time. Everybody doesn't win. The regular season is for chumps. When you're Peyton Manning, it's for chumps. What you do in the postseason is what matters. What you do in a Super Bowl is what's going to leave a lasting, indelible legacy. I've already told everybody that will listen, you're the best quarterback ever. And I didn't stutter. Last year didn't do me any favors. It didn't do you any favors. Does not change my mind one bit. You're still the best. But you got to get another Super Bowl, man. You got to get one more so that they know who the best is. Who the best was. Who the best will ever be. The postseason is where it's at. The regular season is for chumps. Independent variable. Peyton Manning and the defense. What more can I say about that? Peyton Manning and his defense is going to take this team where they're going to go. Last year, when they got to the Super Bowl, what happened? Peyton Manning got stymied and the defense didn't show up. You lost 48-8. Do I need to say more? I do not. Which leads us to our dependent variable. The Super Bowl It's win or go home. It's put up or shut up. It's Super Bowl or bust for the Denver Broncos. You can't make it to the AFC Championship game. You can't make it to the AFC Divisional game. You can't make it to Wild Card Weekend. You got to win the Super Bowl. You can't even make it to the Super Bowl. You got to win the Super Bowl. And the way you're going to do that is Peyton Manning and his defense. That's why they're the independent variable, and the dependent variable depends on Peyton Manning and his defense getting it done, and that's the Super Bowl. The constant. Mile High. What is it? Invesco Stadium or Sports Authorities Field or Sports Authority Field at Mile High. Whatever the hell it is, it's still Mile High. The air is still thin. The ball still travels. And it's still a home field advantage for the Denver Broncos. Any way you slice it. I don't give a damn what you call it. You could call it Speed Stick Mile High. You can call it the Mile High Club, for all I care. At the end of the day, it's an advantage. It's a constant for the Denver Broncos, and they use it to their advantage. Good for them. Conclusion. What does this all mean for the Denver Broncos? This is a talented team. To me, they're the best team in the league. And I feel like it's going to come down to them and the Patriots in the AFC when it's all said and done. There might be a dark horse team in there somewhere. Maybe the Steelers. They jump up and they're ready to assert themselves back into the discussion. But for me right now, it's Patriots, it's Broncos. It's AFC Championship game. If you're Denver, you want that to be in Mile High like it was last year. If you've got to go to New England, all bets are off. All bets are off. I can't guarantee you anything. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, you got to play you have to play the Patriots in New England this year. So that'll be somewhat of a measuring stick, a test for you. If, in fact, you have to travel back out there. And again, that's going to be a huge game. Because if you guys end up with the same record, and I feel like you will, 12-4, that's what I have this Denver Broncos team going in 2014. If you end up with the same record, that head-to-head matchup could be the deciding factor between who's the 1 seed in the AFC and who's the 2 seed in the AFC. And so while, everything else you do throughout the course of the year is going to have an impact on your season and where you end up and how the seeding ends up going, that game could end up being the deciding factor between who goes to the Super Bowl and who does not. So this is that could be a big game for you, but this is a big season for the Denver Broncos organization as a whole. You went out, you made all these moves, and again, I feel like you just pushed all the chips to the middle of the table. You say, hey, ante up. I'm all in. This is it. We're trying to get it done. And so I feel like this is it. This is it. Your chance to win. This is it. You ain't got many chances left. Take advantage of this one. It's right in front of you. Guys got to stay healthy, play to their utmost abilities, and you will find yourself back in the Super Bowl, maybe with the chance to hoist that Lombardi. So that's the Denver Broncos 2014 NFL Lab Report. I thank you for joining me. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. I thank you for joining me. Come back and join me tomorrow when we take a trip back to the East, to the NFC Conference, and we'll talk Philadelphia Eagles. Fly, Eagles. Fly. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.